AI is the new nuclear bomb, right? It's showing up in our world at a time where the empire is collapsing, right? Everyone realizes that the US is struggling. $37 trillion of debt now. Trump borrowed another trillion in the first year, or first 9 months, right? And he's promising to borrow even more. Good boy, okay? Now, the idea is, with all of that borrowing, with all of the debt in the consumer space of the US and so on, with all of the awakening that the world, around the world, everyone now realizes, oh, every single person that's been killed in a war in my lifetime, every single leader that was, thrown out in a coup in my lifetime, every single leader that obeyed in my lifetime obeyed because the US had an influence, right? And so it's an interesting analogy that people need to understand. It's a bit like this, when you're in school, okay, and we all turn 11, and one of the kids is starting to become a little taller than everyone else, and that kid becomes the bully, okay? That's 1944. You had the bully in a red, white, and blue T-shirt, okay? You wait a little bit until we're 16, and another boy becomes, 6'8", okay, massive, but very kind, or at least not harmful, not hurting anyone, okay? And yet the other bully still remains believing that he's the bully. He has his little gang, he's trying to protect his position. And that's what happened. We have a boy in a red T-shirt called China that is now as big, if not bigger, way bigger economically than the US. Now, of course, the reason why people claim that the US economy is the largest economy in the world is for two reasons. One is GDP is measured in US dollars. And the second is someone convinced us that part of GDP, which is economic prosperity, includes consumption. So to run through things and consume things is good for the economy, okay? And 64 to 70% of the US economy is consumption. Interesting, huh? With a population that's probably 20% of China. What that means is, if you turn China's economic power to purchasing power parity, not in US dollars, okay, actually how much economic prosperity can be created, not consumed, with the Chinese economic machine, they're way bigger than the US, okay? But the Chinese don't wage wars around the world. That's something we've never actually seen since, I don't know which dynasty, but they rarely ever leave China. There has been, I think, 5 exceptions.
Very rare. I've looked into it because I was...
Yeah, they were all border disputes, okay? And some of them were like a week of, hey, this is my part, okay? But that doesn't mean they don't wage economic wars, right? And the Chinese way of declining the empire is actually really interesting. It's death by 1,000 cuts, okay? It's the tariffs followed by the rare, the earth metals ban.
And then weakening the US through Russia as well, because they're
exactly.
Russia's war.
It's BRICS. It is, at a point in time, trade that is not US dollar based, which would completely destroy them.
They're doing that a lot with the Middle East and
Correct.
Latin American countries.
Correct. And across BRICS, it will, and we can talk about that, but we're talking about AI today. The idea is that the biggest weapon the US has ever had was the US dollar, right? Because basically it enables them to create that $1 trillion war machine for free. They can just print the money while everyone else has to actually work for it. Now, what that means is that an empire in decline needs another nuclear bomb. They need to prove to the world that they are the leaders that can actually get everyone to stop in their tracks. And that nuclear bomb, unfortunately, is artificial intelligence, artificial superintelligence. And whoever gains control on AGI or ASI first, with enough buffer, they would literally be the masters of the universe, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is the US does it their way, okay? And China is admirably doing it in a very different way. Okay? And by the way, I'm not pro-China or pro-America. I am anti the American abuse of the world. And I say that publicly. We all love America. We all love Americans. I have countless American people that I want prosperity for, that are my dear friends and even family, right? But this administration, this government approach of we're going to bully the whole world is starting to say, please, can we be friends, right? Do you really have to abuse me? Do you really have to, terrorize me, if I can use the word? China is, so America, does it the only way Altmans know how to do it, which basically is a Stargate-like, let's put $500 billion into a project, build massive infrastructure, build AI that looks amazing, right? The Chinese, on the other hand, which you don't even hear about. 2 weeks after Stargate, $500 billion, Trump is signing it with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman and SoftBank, right? And then they drop DeepSeek R3, as powerful as ChatGPT 4.0 at the time, open source, on the edge. Basically, they're telling you, yeah, you can download it and run it on your phone or your personal computer, and it will run fine. And we don't want to make any money out of it. You have to look deeper into what that strategy means. They're basically nullifying the market. They're basically saying, look, if you want to compete, we're not going to make it a competition. There is no competition there. This is available for everyone. So you can spend your $500 billion. You can pretend that you're going to make a big difference, but people eventually will take it for free. Okay, and that strategy bleeds as I said, it's death by 1,000 cuts. The whole idea is it bleeds the bully a little more. How does the bully react? They become more aggressive. And we are in a place where I'm going to get to your question now, finally.
I mean, the context is really important, because when and Vinod Khosla interviewed, who's an early investor in OpenAI, very, very early, one of the first. And when I asked him what's his biggest concern, that was a few months ago, it wasn't about super intelligence and what AI would, unemployment, instability, social unrest. His biggest concern was China winning that race. So you giving that context and how China's playing the game versus the US is really important.
I genuinely believe that China will win this race, right? For many reasons. One of them is America never, as they invested in the military-industrial complex, they didn't invest in infrastructure, so they don't have the power to run those machines, right? It's because, as I said, China's strategy seems to be, they never publicly said that, seems to be to nullify the game, right? And more interestingly, it's because, if you take Sycamore, Google's quantum computer versus I don't actually remember the name of the Chinese quantum computer.
Was it by Alibaba or no?
Yeah, it was either by Alibaba or one of them. It's 5.9 billion times faster.
Then Google's one.
Yeah. Right, but they don't.
What does that mean to be 5.9?
Correct. What does it mean, right? So there are so many ways you can win that race. America always puts it in the propaganda machine. China rarely ever talks about it, but wins it over and over and over and over. Okay, the massive size of their AI infrastructure for supply chain. Okay, their massive size of AI infrastructure. It's not open AI and ChatGPT. It's not fancy, and it doesn't tell you, oh my God, you're the most amazing person in the world, like ChatGPT will always do. Okay. But it's effective. It's the same way the Chinese are doing it. Now, here's the core issue. The core issue is someone will win, okay? And that someone, unfortunately, might not win in everything. So you can see that the arms race is in the language models. It's not really, okay? Is there an arms race in autonomous weapons? Of course. Is there an arms race in supercomputing? Of course. Is there an arms race in chips and chip manufacturing? Okay? Of course, And America uses its weapons by banning the latest NVIDIA chips from China, and then China responds by saying, okay, we're going to make our own, which is going to be 10 times cheaper than yours, and so on. And all of those wars lead to a very unusual dichotomy, first time in human history in my assessment, which is a dichotomy of power. So you're going to see in the next 10 years two things happening at the same time. One is a concentration of power for those who are able to build competitive leading platforms, right? Which unfortunately are not many. From among the companies, it's going to be OpenAI or Anthropic or Google and so on and so forth. And the race is even becoming smaller. From nations, it's only China and and America, and here in the UAE and in Saudi and so on, we may be able to beat the rest of the
Korea
world.
and Japan are trying to catch up pretty quickly as well.
They
Europe
are,
is
Europe is lost and is even regulating
Sad.
itself even
It's
more.
sad.
Yeah.
They're regulating an industry that almost doesn't exist for them.
Correct, right? And so it's quite interesting. You'll get that concentration of power. Very few players will have massive power, okay? And then you'll get a democratization of power at the same time. Why? Because my current startup is basically me and my co-founder and 8 AIs, right? And so I can build an incredible thing that will completely disrupt the dating industry, okay? A multi-billion dollar, multi-billion user industry in 8 weeks, okay? And it applies across. So you go again and you go like, okay, so NVIDIA's advantage on the chips, China then has the advantage on the model with DeepSeek and says, run it on a small chip. Doesn't matter. Okay, you get the advantage on, interestingly, on autonomous weapons. So America will invest in running an F-16 using an AI, but the Houthis will use a drone that also runs on AI.
Just a fraction.
And costs $3,000, right? And now you start to see that it's an interesting mess. But
Europe was spending $1 million per missile to shoot down $20,000 drones by Russia
Correct.
over the last few weeks.
Correct. And that was exactly Iran's way when they bombed the Iron Dome of Israel. It's like, okay, let's flood it with cheap weapons, okay? And they run out of missiles.
Yeah, it's an economic war.
And it is quite interesting because, in all honesty, when we're done with this interview, you and I can spend an hour together here and we'll build whatever we want.
Yeah.
It's incredible. AI-wise. And by the way, the beautiful thing is, when I built Emma, I don't need ChatGPT 5.0. I have sufficient intelligence in any of the open source models, right? So all of the above super intelligence is not going to prevent the democratization of some form of intelligence.
Will that be, so that democratization is exciting for entrepreneurs like us, because there's a lot that will be done in a very short period of time.
Correct.
As AI replaces things that would usually cost a lot of money, and you'll be able to compete with the incumbents. Innovator's dilemma works in your advantage. But then what? Because afterwards, what's your edge? Your edge is able to use these tools that big companies don't use, and they're kind of stuck in their own ways. You know, one of my companies has over 200 employees, and we're struggling to start cutting costs. It's very hard to break down a system. So one of our executives is rebuilding some of the systems we have from scratch, like an entrepreneur. So all these bigger companies that have thousands of employees, it'll be very hard for them to adapt to a world where you and AI could disrupt a $3, $4, $5 billion dating app. But once we're past that stage, what is your edge? Because if you've got an agent that helps you build a business, well, everyone has an agent now. So you no longer have an edge, and then it becomes kind of a battle of energy. So these agents just need energy to operate, and the more energy you can feed them, the more they can operate, and the faster they can operate. And it's no longer the one that has the smartest LLM. The difference between DeepSeek and ChatGPT and Grok is getting smaller and smaller, very incremental. But it feels like it's becoming a power of energy. Who has more energy to feed their LLMs will win that. And that goes back to concentration of power. Do you see where my concern is coming from? If you can break it down and maybe tell me I'm wrong, because that would be reassuring.
No, you're not, but you're measuring it within the current system. Okay? I think the challenge that most people don't, and I don't know the answer, we can brainstorm about it together. It's, the challenge is quite interesting. We have lived, you and I were born, we grew, we succeeded, we failed, we did everything, and everyone that you know, within a capitalist system that is about to be erased. Okay, it's the very underlying system of everything that you know that's changing. Okay, and that's what makes it incredibly difficult to understand what's going to happen. Let me explain. It doesn't matter if you're going to manage to cut costs in your organization or not. I call it the fourth inevitable. You're either going to cut costs and replace some people with AIs and succeed, or you're going to lose and become irrelevant and shut down.